looking for the Joan Quinn Profiles. As an editor for Andy Warhol's Interview, the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner, LA Style, and Detour magazines, Joan covered the social set, the Hollywood hotshots, the international art scene, the mysteries of food, the excitement of travel, and the fabulous world of fashion. Joan continues to find creative people on the cutting edge who make things happen. Here's Joan Agajanian Quinn.
Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome to the Joan Quinn Profiles. Waiting to be profiled is author Bruce Northam and photographer Michael Childers. Michael's photographs are on the set, so you'll keep looking at them. Bruce Northam is an adventure author. He's a speaker and a tourism consultant. He circled the globe 5 times and part of the globe with me.
Yes, indeed.
Yes, we did.
We met in Malta.
When he's not on a trip, he lives in New York City, where he was born, right? So
I was born in a quaint little island just off of New York known as Isle de Long.
Really?
Some folks call it Long Island.
Oh, Isle de Long? You've been around the world so long that you're starting to talk like a travel writer.
It just sounds nicer.
Bruce, you're always gone, but you write columns in I don't know how many magazines. You're on CNN, you're on all the newspapers. When do you have time to do TV, write these columns, and be a travel writer?
I do it in splurges, you know. I'll do a hardcore, right now I'm doing a major book promotion for my new book, Globetrotter Dogma. Before March, I was on the road for 18 months, touching base in Manhattan very infrequently.
So when you touch base, you do an interview or you do something like that?
I type. I go into a really freaky schedule of working 6 to 8 hours in a row, then I'll sleep for 4 to 5 hours and just back and forth like between my bed and my laptop, and then every 4th day I'll go out and drink beer to stay sane.
When did you decide to be a travel writer?
When I realized that I was terminally unemployable in other occupational modes. I was a salesman of various capacities through my 20s, and I'd work, make some good money, get fired or quit, hit the road. So I logged some great travel in my 20s, but right around 30, I just said, screw it, this isn't working for me. And I vowed that I was going to be a speaker, which I now do on the university circuit, and I enjoy it a lot. As an author, that's my ticket to ride there.
So do you do slideshows?
Better than that. I mean, you think of slideshow, you think of Uncle Buck's Vacation. It's like, oh God, Uncle Buck went to Cuba. Who gives a? But
here's Bruce. How boring is Bruce going to be?
Bruce is boring. But I have images. I have show and tell. For instance, I bring a gourd with me, which actually is the penis gourd that the New Guinea natives wear.
I read about that in your book.
Yep. I bring a fish trap. I have some show and tell. So it's a third, anecdotal, me on the stage. The middle third is images, and then the last third is Q&A.
And does an agent set this up for you?
I had an agent do it for a few years now. I'm doing it on my own.
You can do it on your own?
Well, because I've got it down to a science. My website, AmericanDetour.com, is full service. Anyone can go there. A magazine wants to know if they should send me out. I have my bio. I have a lecture page. I have a TV page. I'm working on a show right now called American Detour. I'm driving the length of California 101.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you about. Where does it start?
It starts north of Crescent City. It goes up into Oregon, but for my purposes, I'm trying to rebrand California 101 like 66, because it's a very cool road.
So 101 is like your detour, American detour type of thing.
Right, and I'm trying to find the edge in the ordinary. On the trip from north to south, it's 935 miles. It goes through 16 counties. I've interviewed people on recumbent tricycles pulling a coffin that they sleep in, that they drive along the road, hands-on healers, chainsaw carvers.
Where do you decide to stay? I mean, like when you get to, say, Crescent City, would you stay there for 5 days, or?
I've been 30 days on the road for this trip, which is kind of my standard amount of time that I do now.
Like research stuff?
Yeah, like I recently did Burma and Fiji. I did a month each. I did 30 days on the road of 101. I'm getting towards the end now. That's why we're sitting here in LA. As a travel writer, I'm not ashamed to say that I get help sometimes from people will say, stay here for free, eat here, let's dine. So I'm doing trade outs, not necessarily for publicity, but trade outs. I'm a good gamble because I'm grooming myself right now. As you see, I did my hair today,
Yes,
right?
I see the spray, hairspray.
I'm working on becoming a version of Charles Kuralt merged with Hunter Thompson.
Oh, really?
And American Detour is that's my brand, that's my website, that's my show, that's my next book. And because my new book, Globetrotter Dogma, is doing very well, it's going to be in Restoration Hardware, which amazingly, they sell a lot of books. Because they sell books the old-fashioned way. They sell them face up on a coffee table next to a fluffy couch.
I'm going to show your book.
That pushed me to third printing within 2 months. So it's
the thing about writing books, you wrote a first book that was a very tight budgeted trip.
The Frugal Globetrotter.
Frugal was the way to put it.
Right.
And you did a lot of walking. I remember when we met, you walked from one end of the island to the other.
That's my thing. The Price is Right.
Is that what happens?
Oh, well, in Malta, there's old Roman roads that are disused and unbelievably amazing.
And so you walked that. And this,
My dad and I walked coast to coast across northern England.
I saw that.
So I've taken from 20 years.
But this is not like a travel book. The Frugal Traveler was a travel book.
The Frugal Globetrotter was your guide to quitting your job or leaving school for a year and traveling the world. How do I do it? Using air couriers, around the world airline consolidators, some mild scams, ways to get into events with fake ID.
Right.
It's a book with phone numbers and websites.
Oh,
so
it is.
This book has.
This book, Globetrotter Dogma, has 100 canons. I love the idea because I was reading it last night. I liked canon number 5, more hugging, less mugging.
Right.
What does that mean?
Well, I did a survey about the number of times that people touch in conversations, non-romantic situations where people having lunch or a beer, and around the world took a poll in Sao Paulo. Per hour, the average people would touch 165 times.
Hard to believe.
Hungary down to like 45 times. Reykjavik, Iceland, 5. London, England, 0.
That's really funny because you're going from like this hot continent or weather to getting cooler and cooler. Like just the weather maybe makes that happen.
Yeah, I think it's the closer you go to the equator, the people chill out more. I call that palm culture.
Oh, you do? Oh, so you have a name for all these. Now, number 37 was, canon number 31, resist complaining.
Yeah. I mean, just take a look at the news and see how the world is suffering. The one thing about this book, I was in the middle of it when September 11th happened. And the book remained the same. It's in the same vein as Don't Sweat the Small Stuff or Life's Little Instruction Book, but it's the rules of the road from my vision, the wisdom I've gathered from people around the world in 20 years of travel. And we have it great here. Our country took a heavy blow, but gas is cheap, our water's drinkable. For the most part, you can grab a hamburger and then not get sick.
Right.
We've really got it great here. So when I'm abroad and I see people trying to bring Western standards to an undeveloped country,
complaining,
it's just it's the spoiled brat routine.
And the other one we already talked about, I think it was canon number 37, walk. Don't be afraid to walk.
Yeah, don't use your savor your foot power. Yeah, I mean, my philosophy on travel is that the adventure begins when the plan fails. And I concoct a mission before any trip, even if it's not my hobby. Even if I'm not a fanatic about lemons, I'll still say I want to go find the person in this town who grows lemons. My thing that I do is I'm into the guitar, so I will find the instrument maker or the musician in town that plays the stringed instrument, whether it's a bouzouki in Turkey or a guitar in Venezuela or some bizarre instrument in central China. I'll find the person in the village that either makes them or can play them.
But that takes you out, and it takes you into a whole new vein. You learn something new on this trip that's not in a guidebook.
And when you pretend to have a mission, I mean, I had a fake ID made.
Yeah, that's true.
I had a fake ID made in Bangkok 15 years ago that said I was a journalist. And I used that thing to get in untold Nick games, rock concerts, MTV award parties. It just gets you past the bevy of con artists waiting to fleece you because you're on a mission. You're not just sitting there. How can I have fun? Who's going to entertain me?
Which reminds me.
And you end up in people's kitchens. That's the goal of travel. End up in someo's kitchen. You hit a grand slam.
Is that one of our canons too?
Get back in the kitchen is one of the canons,
Okay.
yes.
Now, when you start on these trips, do you use somebody else's guidebook to
I used to. Now my strategy is I'll look at a guidebook. As a travel writer, I get a lot of guidebooks for free, so I'll definitely look at them. But my strategy is I don't really prepare that much anymore. I have enough knowledge to not get ripped off.
So you know where to go. If you're going to go to a new city, you don't need a guidebook.
Well, what my strategy is, okay, I'm at the airport, usually it's JFK, and I'm going to be on a flight for, at least 8 hours, sometimes 14 hours to go to a distant land. I'll survey the waiting area, and I'll see who the people are. I'll look at the footwear, and I'll assess who the people who won't be devastated by a rainstorm, who are the travelers, and as the international flights, it's like a happy hour. Talk to people, find out where they're going, come together. If you're landing in Jakarta, Indonesia at 2 in the morning, you're going to need a cab. Get together with 3 other people and share the cab. Find out where they're staying.
So you do this all while you're waiting to get on the plane. You're thinking about it.
That's when I do research. Before I get in the plane, on the plane, and then also when you get off the plane, there's people that are coming to leave the country. Look at someone who you think dresses like you, has the experience that you might want to have based on their demographic, and ask them where they've been. So I do on-the-spot research.
So 62 and 63 canon, be worldly and don't repeat, hop over the fence. Hop the fence, what is that?
Well, first let's talk about be worldly. That's a tongue-in-cheek canon. And I live in Manhattan, and there's a lot of people. I lived in Japan for 6 months, and I live in Manhattan most of the time. And there's a lot of people who are sushi experts, and they are just off the charts, and they love to get around a table of other sushi magnates and impress with their ordering savvy. So I just knock it off at the top. When we get into a restaurant, I'll pull a waiter aside and say, listen, I'm going to talk to you in make-believe Japanese. I'm going to mention all these newfangled terms. Just nod and bring 2 combo platters. And it works. So that's how I be worldly.
That's how you're worldly?
Yeah, and it works really well. The other one, hop the fence, that comes out, like right now, because of my travel writer status, I have the fortune of staying at Shutters on the Beach. It's an expensive place. It costs about what it would cost to support me in India for 2 months with a driver and a masseuse per night.
That's really interesting, isn't it?
But I'm there. Hop the fence means get to the pool. There's a great pool there. It's tough to get to. Sorry, Shutters, about blowing the wrap here, but you can
get to the pool and see what's going on.
And enjoy it.
Is the pool really the pool, or is it just taking in everything that's in that five-star attitude?
The pool is the centerpiece of the thing, so that's what you're going to see, what those people are getting for their money. And the fake ID trick works. I mean, you don't these days, post 9/11, the fake IDs, that's maybe a little risky. I'm gonna have to edit that in the next version. But simply saying that you're a writer allows you to be more interrogative and gets you closer to the heart of people.
And so that's what we're going to see in Bruce's books. But I think we're going to see you on TV, and I think you're going to put together some show. And I hope you use this show as your...
This is my launch pad.
This is your launch pad. Good. Thanks, Bruce.
Thank you so much, Joan.
Thank you. Thanks for watching Bruce. Don't go away, because Michael Childers, the photographer, will be on right after this.
That was fun.
Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and we're back with photographer Michael Childers, who was born in North Carolina, and at the age of 14 had his first camera, which it was thought that it was supposed to balance that army brat life that he was leading. He graduated from UCLA Film School and directed some student films, but he started taking headshots to pay his tuition and to get through. And all of a sudden, it seemed to have taken over your career, Michael.
Well, it's my career was sort of an accident. I wanted to be like everybody else in LA. I wanted to be a film director, but alas, most of my friends were actors and singers, and people like Jim Morrison were in my film class. So I started taking headshots of them, and I was getting album covers and book covers, and then one thing led to another. Yeah.
And you did a lot of theater work, probably because those people, your friends, were doing theater at that time.
They were all, you know, actors and dancers. And
dancers, you did a lot of dancers
I worked,
too, didn't you?
I worked, when I moved to New York and London, I worked a lot with the ballet and Joffrey and the American Ballet Theater.
And did you take pictures of them on stage, or just portraits, or?
Oh, everything. I mean, when I worked with Peter Brook, they were dragging me all over the stage with my camera, and it was very exciting. I was lucky enough to meet with Ken Tynan in New York, and I did Oh Calcutta there, which was scandalous at its time.
That was in the beginning, and did you take all those people nude?
Oh, I did, and really, I got over and finally we had to be nude, Jacques Levy and myself, the director, because the actors thought it was unfair. That got...
Is that how those pictures
I got a lot
about?
of, you know, I got over a lot of fears.
Oh, that's it. That's an interesting one.
It was very freeing, and I did, Ken Tynan took me to London and Paris and Germany. We did Oh Calcutta there, but he more importantly introduced me to Laurence Olivier, and I was, and because Ken Tynan was the dramaturge at the National Theater, and
you have some fabulous...
he took me to be, I was the only American to be a photographer at the National Theater, Great Britain, and it was incredible.
Your portraits of Olivier are totally unique. Yeah. Because, I mean, he's been photographed millions of times, but yours just seem to stand out. And I wish I had one with me, but I don't. You did work at Interview. You worked for Interview. You worked at the Dance magazine. Yeah. You worked at Interview. I don't know how
I was one of the founding photographers of Interview in about 1970.
And I didn't meet you till after that,
a long time later.
Yeah.
I was in New York working there, and Andy and well, I'd worked with Paul Morrissey a lot on some film projects.
But that's back to film again.
I was going back and forth, and Andy said, you know, you're such a great photographer, you know, for After Dark and all these magazines. Why don't you? I'm starting a new magazine. We don't pay anything. And I said, well, Andy, will you give us a full page picture spread? He said, sure. So, and it turned out to be this extraordinary magazine, which...
The great thing about Interview was, and just what you said, you could do anything you wanted. He would give you a page, and even though he wasn't paying you, you could do what you wanted and be creative.
Yeah. I mean, I hardly ever talked to the editors, and I just sent them some photographs, which I thought might be right, and they always ran them.
And this is Michael Childers, because we love the creativity that you were displaying at that time. You also did a lot of fashion work.
I did some in New York and London.
Maybe because of the fashion people. You did portraits of fashion people.
I worked, you know, Lagerfeld was a great friend of mine, and I used to stay at his house in Paris. And then my best friend was the head of Yves Saint Laurent, working with Pierre Berger. So, I mean, that whole world, that milieu, I adored it. But I never really pursued, because I moved back to Los Angeles after spending many years in London. And the fashion scene was really quite quiet here. So you have to be in a fashion capital to become a famous fashion photographer.
But I wasn't even talking so much about being a famous fashion photographer, because I think the fame of your pictures came from knowing the people and doing individual portraits of those people. That's what always made me think that you were so connected to fashion.
Well, I worked working in London, New York, and Hollywood I worked on 150 films.
But let's get to that.
As something called special photography, which I don't think exists anymore.
Let's get to that, because you kind of stopped your career and went to produce, or with John Schlesinger, the great producer, the great friend of ours, the great mate of yours for 30 years. My great partner for 37 years.
I
know, it's so great. Yeah. But that kind of shifted what you were doing in a way. You were actually working on the films besides photographing on the sets, right?
Well, I was there while they were making them, and sometimes helping my partner John with the film. But I always had my Nikons and my Leicas there.
But did they exciting. Do that? Did they have a photographer on the set?
Well, besides the Union Stills guy, they always had a special, which I did a lot of specials on John's films, and my great friend Mary Ellen Mark came out and did some too, and Greg Gorman later on. who are all great friends of mine. And
So they were working on those films at the same time?
Yeah, and I traveled all around the world working on films.
But you had a different kind of a status. You were able to bring these people into the films because working with John the way you did, and you spotted people who had talent, and he respected you, John.
Oh yeah,
so
I'd work, and working off Broadway or in London, I'd find new people, working for Interview or some of the magazines, and a new person who was incredible, and I'd bring them to John or whoever, and I'd say, God, this is incredible.
That's what I mean.
New talent, like Richard Gere when he was just starting, and Tom Berenger, and Demi Moore used to, stay in my studio and on Melrose when I had that studio. She was at Fairfax High School.
So you had all these connections. The other thing you mentioned, great photographers. I know you really respected Eve Arnold's work, and I just saw your two photographs at the Apex Gallery. I want to get to Louis Stern's fine art too, but let's talk about the Apex because they had on display David Hockney
and
Andy Warhol.
The show at Apex is called Artists as Art, and I think it's really one of the best shows in Los Angeles. I
love this photograph.
It is a fabulous show, and David Barinholtz is so smart. He's one of the more interesting photo galleries in LA. And this was Andy done in his New York loft in about 1978 with this wonderful Joe D'Alessandro was the superstar at the time.
Joe D'Alessandro, right.
And I was one, I think, I'm not sure, but I think I was one of the few photographers to photograph Andy at his house in Paris.
This is in Paris.
And the Rue de Cherche-Midi.
Where we all were
incredible.
all the time.
You know how incredible that apartment was.
I love this because this is so typical of that apartment.
I know. And we were going out to dinner with David Hockney and with Salvador Dali that night. And what all these fabulous parties.
What kind of, could you just snap
yeah,
shots?
sometimes.
What did you do?
Sometimes they were more set up and posed, and sometimes they were just snaps.
This is my favorite because I love David, and David Hockney loves nature. This is so
David's one of my best friends for the last 37 years. He's just an extraordinary man, a great artist, and a great wit. This is our in Sussex, in England.
That's fabulous. So I was kind of laying this background of all your portraiture because that's how I always knew you, and that's what I always wanted you to do of me, a portrait, because you knew I collected portraits. And then all of a sudden I went to see this distortion show at Louis Stern's gallery in West Hollywood, and here are these photographs that are called distortions with influence from Cortege, Dali, Ouija,
Francis Bacon,
Henry
Moore.
And were you influenced by them?
Most certainly. I wanted to say something totally new and with sculptural, and I'd done a lot of shows with male and female nudes, but I wanted to take these shapes and use these bodies as sculpture.
Which is, and how do you actually photograph this?
Well, I built a convex concave mirror about 12 feet long on a motor, and then the mirror moves, and I have dancers and yogi people and actors, and we scan the mirror for these wonderful shapes. Yeah.
The mirror
moves, and you create a sense of theater or abstraction or strangeness or something sensual.
On the screen right now, is this one person?
That's one person, yeah. He's a wonderful yogi and actor, yeah. And I thought that shape was extraordinary when it went into. Yeah.
And so, how do you manipulate? How do you manipulate the person?
I direct the person. I try to find the shape that I want, and sometimes they totally amaze me. Ron Athey was so extraordinary when I worked with him, this great performance artist. And it helps to have dancers. Dancers can move into the most wonderful. And my yogi friends. I'm just finishing a book on yoga, so I have a lot of yoga people.
You have a black background?
Black velvet. It holds. It's a tent. It's a theater.
Oh, it's a tent.
It's a black velvet, and I'm like a Roman emperor covered with black velvet, and my assistant, we're all covered black velvet. And
This, in a way, is back to when you were photographing dancers, it seems to me.
It's a whole dance routine. And sometimes it turns out very strange. Sometimes it's very sensual. Sometimes it's very psychological. I'm just stretching the boundaries of these sort of
I'll
these
show
shapes.
this one, too.
This is Black Medusa. Yeah, this is an actress friend of Aranethi's, and I loved her face. And when I saw that in the mirror, sometimes it's like pre-Columbian sculpture. Sometimes it's like Peter Brook's Barat Saad. It gets very strange.
And then, do you move the camera, or is this all?
I'm constantly moving.
you are.
I'm searching for a shape.
And do you keep clicking the camera, or?
Yeah.
Oh, you do.
Film
So you take.
film is cheap. Film is cheap.
So you
Yeah.
keep clicking the camera.
Yeah, no.
Why did you go to this departure? It's so sculptural.
I've been thinking about this for 6 years, and I really wanted to do something new, and I'd been working with nudes, and I did my yoga book. And I really fell in love with these yoga people because they could just do the most wonderful shapes. And I love dancing. I love working with dancers.
Do you think this will take you into sculpting? Have you thought about
Who knows?
doing?
I don't know.
Do you work with your hands? I don't know either.
No, I love being a photographer.
You know, at one point, talking about David Hockney, he also went into these abstracted forms and this Picasso influence, and he came from like straight, direct paintings. And have you talked to him about how you're going into this and how he went into it?
Well, I think it's great to reinvent yourself every 5 years or 10 years, and this is what I've tried with these. I mean, how do you photograph flowers? Because Tom Burrell and Mapplethorpe and Irving Penn have done it so brilliant. And I think I've done something a little bit new.
But you did these flowers. And then one of the paintings, it looked like a painting to me. I was calling it a painting at Louis. Was a woman on top with this beautiful lotus flower and in color, and it looked like a painting.
Yeah, it's imbu. It's an iris print, and the color is very delicate. And she was a yogi and a dancer.
Oh,
and
so
it's very mystical and very transcendental, that photograph.
So I know you have hundreds of ideas for books. The yoga book, book will be one.
And I hope that the distortions in my mind will another year. I'm just finishing another series of objects and flowers, and then I'll be done with this.
Is it easier than working with people?
With actors?
Flowers don't talk back to you, do
no,
they?
Yeah, I've done my nudes for a while. Yeah,
You did. Well, Michael, we're so happy you were with us today, and I thank you for coming out. And I love just discovering the new things you're doing every time I walk into an art gallery.
Thank you.
Thanks for being with us today, and keep writing to 777 South Figueroa, 44th floor, Los Angeles 917, and we'll see you next time on the Joan Quinn Profiles.